Today, we're going on a little journey. We're going to grab an ecological zoom lens, start with just one single living thing, and then pull back and back and back until a whole planet snaps into view. You're about to see just how connected everything really is. So, let's kick things off with a pretty deep question, one that gets right to the heart of ecology. Just think about it for a second. A single tree in a forest, a lone wolf, you sitting right there. Are you ever really alone? Well, as we're about to find out, nature's answer is a very loud, very clear nope.
And the answer to that question, well, it reveals itself as we start to zoom out. It's kind of like opening one of those Russian nesting dolls, you know? Each layer you pull back reveals a bigger one that holds it. Let's peel back those layers.
Okay, so you have to start somewhere. In ecology, that starting point, our ground floor, is the individual. Just one specific organism. Could be a deer, could be a single oak tree, could even be one little bacterium. That's level one.
But of course, that one deer isn't just wandering around by itself. It's part of a herd. Ecologists call this a population. And that's just any group of the same species all living together in the same area.
Let's zoom out again. So that herd of deer, they're sharing the forest with other populations, right? The trees, the birds, the wolves, the squirrels. The second you start looking at all these different species interacting with each other, you're not looking at a population anymore. You're looking at a community.
Okay, one final zoom out for now. Let's take that whole living community and add in the non-living stuff. The sunlight, the air, the water in the stream, the dirt on the ground. When you combine all the living things and their physical environment, bam, you've got it. That's an ecosystem.
So what is an ecosystem really? Honestly, the best way to think about it is like a living neighborhood. You've got all the residents, and you've got the physical place they live in, the infrastructure they all rely on. And every single ecosystem, I don't care if it's a desert or a deep-sea vent, it's defined by this dance between two things. You have the biotic factors, that's all the living stuff, plants, animals, fungi. And then you have the abiotic factors, the non-living parts, like the temperature, the amount of sunlight, the water. The real magic happens in how those two sides affect each other.
Okay, so we've got our neighborhood and we've got our residents. But what's powering the whole thing? What's the engine that makes the whole show go? If you follow the trail back far enough, it all runs on one thing: energy. In any ecosystem, you've basically got two major teams. On one side, you have the producers. Think of them as the self-feeders, the little solar-powered factories. Plants are the classic example, right? They suck up sunlight and turn it into food. Then you've got the other team, the consumers. That's everybody else, from a tiny insect to a giant whale to you and me. We can't make our own food, so we've got to get our energy by eating other living things. So how does that energy actually move around? We all know the classic food chain. A rabbit eats the grass, a fox eats the rabbit. That's called the grazing food chain. But here's what's so cool, there's this whole other food chain, a sort of shadow economy, running right alongside it. It's the detritus chain, and it's powered by all the dead stuff, fallen leaves, dead wood, you name it, and it's run by the planet's cleanup crew, the decomposers like fungi and bacteria. They're the ultimate recyclers. But nature is never a neat, tidy, straight line, is it? No way. It's a messy, tangled, super complicated web. And this web, it has rules. Rules that create a really delicate and sometimes pretty surprising balance.
I mean, in the real world, a fox doesn't only eat rabbits. It'll eat mice and berries and whatever else it can find. And that rabbit, it's being hunted by hawks and wolves, too. Once you start mapping all those connections, you don't get a simple chain. You get a food web. And all that complexity, all that messiness, that's actually what makes an ecosystem stable and strong.
A neat way to picture this structure is with a pyramid. Usually, if you just count the number of living things at each level, you get this classic pyramid shape. You have a massive base of producers, like millions of blades of grass. That supports a smaller number of herbivores, which supports an even smaller number of top carnivores. Makes sense, right? But, and this is where nature gets really interesting, sometimes the pyramid gets flipped upside down. How is that even possible? Well, just imagine one single giant tree. That's just one producer.
But that one tree can support thousands and thousands of insects, which are then eaten by maybe a few dozen birds. So in this case, the pyramid of numbers is totally inverted. Cool, right?
And the relationships inside this web aren't just about who eats who. They can be incredibly different. You've got mutualism. That's a total win-win, like a bee getting nectar while pollinating a flower. Both sides benefit. And then you have the other extreme, competition. That's more of a lose-lose, where two species are both getting hurt because they're fighting over the same food or territory, like lions and hyenas.
Now, all this interconnectedness is incredible, but it comes with a catch. It has a really dangerous side effect, especially when we humans introduce stuff into the mix that just doesn't belong. There's a name for it: biomagnification.
Here's how it plays out. Let's say a tiny amount of a toxic pesticide like DDT gets into the water. It's so small you wouldn't even think it matters. But then it gets absorbed by plankton. A little fish comes along and eats hundreds of those plankton. A bigger fish eats dozens of those little fish. And finally, a bird, like an eagle, eats several of those bigger fish.
And here is the terrifying part. The toxin doesn't just pass through, it collects. It builds up in the fatty tissues at every single step. So that tiny, seemingly harmless trace in the water, by the time it reaches that eagle at the top of the food chain, its concentration has been multiplied 10 million times. It is a stunning and frankly scary example of how one small problem at the bottom of the web can become an absolute catastrophe at the top. Okay, for our last and biggest zoom out, we're going beyond just one ecosystem. We're going to look at how all ecosystems are linked together on a global scale through the planet's own giant recycling systems. I mean, just think about the water cycle. Water evaporates from the Pacific Ocean, forms a cloud, travels thousands of miles, and then falls as rain on a forest in North America. It's one giant planetary plumbing system that connects literally every single living thing. And it's not just water. The same goes for the literal building blocks of life, like carbon. Look at this. We talk about carbon in the atmosphere, but the vast majority of it is stored in the oceans, and it's constantly moving between the sea, the land, the air, and every living thing. The carbon that makes up your body right now has been on the most incredible journey all over the globe. And that brings us right back to ourselves. After seeing this huge, intricate, beautiful web, from a single microbe all the way up to the entire planet's climate, the final question just kind of hangs there, doesn't it? In a world disconnected, what is our role? Because we aren't just living in this system, we are one of its most powerful forces. And understanding that, well, that changes everything.